again to South Florida One. I am your hostess, Gold TA 70s chick here, and I hope everyone's having a great week. I've been keeping very busy. I'm going to be a little out of sorts today. I've been really overdoing myself on the yard work. I've been doing a lot of painting, a lot of yard projects, and just pushing myself, and I haven't been getting really a whole lot of sleep. So so just excuse me if I sound a little and if I act a little out of sorts. So but anyway, I've got a very interesting show for you today. A topic is going to be fun. It's going to be short-lived and obscure TV shows of the 70s, and I've got a lot of interesting ones. I listed about 20 that I could find. There's some that I knew about and some I didn't. I'm going from the best, what I feel to be the best obscure ones, all the way down to the absolute pathetic. And a lot of these, I can tell you how long they were aired. Some of them barely got off the ground. Some ones, like this first one I'm going to talk about, was on the air from February 1978 to August of 1979. And it was called Project UFO. And it was created by Jack Webb of Dragnet fame. And this was produced by Colonel William T. Coleman, who was the real-life head of Project One Blue Book. And it's based on Project Blue Book, and it's the official name of the program that the U.S. Air Force managed to investigate UFO encounters. And while most of these investigations were proved fake or cases of mistaken identity, there were about 30% that could not be satisfactorily explained. And these are the ones that were dramatized on the show. But even though the show lasted for 2 seasons, a lot of the public, of course, is fickle, and it faded to the background and they simply forgot about it, which is a shame because anything with UFOs is always popular with people who believe in them or not. Myself, I'm divided on that. I'm not really certain, but I can tell you one thing: the Sasquatch and Bigfoot do not exist. And I covered that in my folklore mythical story of a mythical being in the 70s. The next longer running program that was also interesting is called The Sixth Sense, which is not to be confused with the fantastic Bruce Willis film of the same name. And Gary Collins, actor named Gary Collins, plays Dr. Michael Rhodes, who is a parapsychologist who worked solving mysteries centering around ESP and ghosts. This was on the TV networks from January 1972 to December 1972, with a total of 25 episodes. It was short-lived, but very popular enough to draw big-name stars of the decade, of the times. Lee Majors, Stephanie Powers, Joan Crawford, which surprises me, and Mariette Hartley, to name a few. It was later shown in syndication along with Rod Serling's new show called The Night Gallery, and both were badly edited, going from 60 minutes to 30 minutes each for this kind of venture. So that really did it a disservice to both programs. But and the next one I had investigated was an interesting. Hey Lee, this one I think you'll like. It's called Mobile One, and I thought it was based on CB because of what this character does, but it was actually a actor called Jackie Cooper who played a veteran news reporter named Peter Campbell, who covered news from his mobile unit called KONE, which was new technology at the time. So he would do all his news broadcasts from a mobile unit, which was pretty cool. That one lasted for only 3 months, from September to December 1975. And the reason why a lot of these programs were short-lived, because of course, there was heavy competition they were pegged against. And this one was put up against Sanford and Son, Chico and the Man, Big Eddie, which I've never heard of, and MASH, of course, which is one of the most popular network shows of the decade. And of course, it was spawned from the movie MASH. And an interesting side note to those of you who don't know, The title song to MASH was an instrumental being that the lyrics were very very drew, what's the name I'm looking for? Not gloomy, but anyway, I can't think of the word right now. Very disturbing because it was called "Suicide is Painless," and it was sung by Al D. Laurie and written by Al D. Laurie, I believe. And that was the story behind that, why that was only cut as an instrumental. But on to the next slot in the long list of the forgotten shows of the decade. And as again, I'm pegging them from the best to the most interesting down to the most pathetic. And the next one down on the list is Chopper One. And it was an Aaron Spelling produced show, and it spanned 13 episodes starting from January to April of 1974, only 3 months, and starred Jim McMullen and Dirk Benedict, who went on to, you know him from Battlestar Galactica fame. Of course, he ventured out toward that after this was taken off the air and was now defunct. He moved on to Battlestar Galactica fame. And Jim plays Don Burdick, and Dirk Benedict is Gil Foley, and they are both chopper pilots who were the eye in the sky to the officers that were on ground level, and the officers were chasing criminals, of course, duh. And this show, by some critics, was called Adam 12 with rotary blades, which I guess it didn't go over very well with the critics, obviously. And it aired from 8 to 8:30 on Thursday nights. And this show was very expensive to produce. Half an hour usually ran about 90 grand, and this one ran 140 grand due to the fact that they need, of course, 2 helicopters, and they had to pay the city of LA various fines. And the director of each episode was given stunt pay wages, because he had to fly to direct all the action in order, so that they were paid stunt wages, which was pretty nice. So that was the end of that. Very expensive, and of course they lost, which was sad. They lost a lot of money in the process due to, I'm sure they thought it was going to be a big TV and maybe draw people away from the competition. Who knows? It might have went over better if it weren't so expensive to produce. So they lost a lot of money in the process. And but I like that Adam 12 with rotary blades. That's pretty amusing. Another one that aired for only one season, 12 episodes, and it was from September to November of 1975, 2 months. It was called 3 for the Road, and it starred Leif Garrett, who you know him now as a B-list actor, along with other B-list actors that are featured on shows like World's Dumbest Criminals, World's Dumbest Stunts, Craziest, and whatever. And of course, he was starred with the guy whose name escapes me, the one that played the geek Waldo on Family Matters. There was Tanya Harding. There was Danny Bonaducci, who, oh my God, his face is so punchable. Ever since Partridge Family, I never liked him. Always wanted to bitch slap him. And who else? Todd Bridges. There was a number of them. A lot of B-list actors and TV actors and actresses. But anyway, it was Leif Garrett, Vince Van Patten, and an actor named Alex Rocco, who played the dad. And after his wife dies, he takes his 2 sons on adventures all around the world, all around the country. And they meet lots of interesting and colorful people on the way. And a lot of times they would get mixed up in some parts of their lives. A lot of the guest appearances were big names of the day as well. Larry Hagman, Stephanie Powers, and Tim Matheson. I've noticed too, as I go along with these shows, I noticed a trend, a pattern here in 70s shows. It always seems like a lot of them are taking care of siblings when the mother or father dies, or taking in siblings after the kids' mother and father were killed. Somebody's widowed. It's always something like that. Like I'll notice, of course, 8 is Enough, for instance, which was a big name show, and I watched that religiously, but I couldn't understand how I had a crush on Adam Rich. He was so freaking annoying. The actress at the time was Diana Hyland, who played the mom, but unfortunately she died in January of 1977. I think of, I can't remember what it was, cancer, brain cancer or something, and John Travolta dated her. She was much older than him, and she was on there for a very short time period, and then that's when they brought in Betty Buckley, and she was a stepmother. So that was, a true to life experience there. But every other TV show, every other TV of the day, where it was so much about widows and parents die. It's just really strange, and I'd like to know the reasoning behind that. Anyway, here's another one that follows this algorithm. Mulligan Stew, which aired for only 2 months, and it was a comedy drama. It was from October to December of 1977. And Michael Mulligan, Lawrence Pressman plays Michael Mulligan, who was a high school and teacher and a football coach. He was married to Jane, and they had 3 kids of their own, but they had to take in Michael Mulligan's sister's 4 children when she and her husband are killed. Let's see, is this the second one? Yeah, this is the second. 3 for the Road was the first one that I'm covering. This was the second one regarding being widowed. Somebody, not widowed, this was both parents that were killed. And anyway, the Mulligans and the newly adopted siblings have a hard time relating to each other due to the fact that both sets of parents had enforced their different morals and values. So they would constantly clash. And producers would hope this scenario would provide comedic and dramatic elements, but sadly the public was fickle. And I'd heard of this too in the 70s. Of course, there was very few programs that I watched, and the main programs I always followed religiously were Dukes of Hazzard, BJ and the Bear. Why, I don't know, and I'm no feminist by any means, but BJ was one of the most sexist people and the most jerks I ever watched on television. He had an attitude, real swaggering, like, yeah. And even back then, I don't know how, I had a crush on him, but luckily that was squashed when Dukes of Hazzard came along. Anyway, too, and going back to the next one, which is really interesting, and Lee, this one is called Gemini Man. And no, this isn't about you, but the title struck me as funny because, you were born one, and, that in name, and not how much you believe in that, of course. But Gemini Man was a very interesting one. Ben Murphy and Sam Casey, I think Sam Casey, yeah. Ben Murphy, I'm sorry, I can't see. I don't have my close-up glasses on. But Ben Murphy plays Sam Casey, who is a secret agent working for a government organization called Introspect. And Sam had become contaminated with radiation in an underwater explosion, which rendered him invisible. But it was only through a new concoction, a new creation that Introspect was working on, which was a special watch that would help Sam become visible again. But the catch was he couldn't stay. The drawback was he couldn't stay visible for longer than 15 minutes in 24 hours, or else he would die. And it was sort of a revamp of the Invisible Man, which aired the previous year. And only the difference is this character can turn his visibility on and off, so to speak. Hence the Gemini Man, duality, two different scenarios, 2 different split personalities, Psychotic people. Just kidding. Hey, Dana, I'm glad you can meet here. I was just discussing a program called the Gemini Man, and I was talking about how, this guy was able to become visible and invisible due to a device that this government program he was working for gave him work to work with, because he was a secret agent. He became infected with radiation after underwater explosion, so he was to have that, and he could switch in and on and off. So yeah, and there's a certain Gemini we both know that we've been discussing, and I know you know who that is. But this Lee, actually Arthur, I call him Arthur, of course, to you, because to differentiate between the two. But I know him as Lee. He goes by his middle name, Lee. Okay, oops. Cancel. Hello. All right, and there's another one who there's no dates given on this one, because I think it was dropped so quickly. I guess the black exploitation TV genre couldn't hold up to the movie, the black exploitation movies. And this one was called Get Christy Love, and it was a lookalike. It was a Pam Grier lookalike named Teresa Graves, who was cast as the lead character, and she plays Christy Love, who is a tough-as-nails Afro-American undercover cop, and she worked for a special investigation and division of the LAPD. Initially, actress Cicely Tyson was supposed to play the starring role, but when her movie, the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, was running over schedule, that's when they called in Teresa Graves. And the series was not released on DVD, but the TV movie was released. And on a side note, Teresa had a very beautiful singing voice, and she began to pursue a career in the entertainment field as a member of a group called the Doodletown Pipers. Okay. That sounds like a kid's TV show. Anyway, but sadly, she died at only age 54 due to injuries sustained in a house fire, which is really sad. But yeah, when I read this, people were saying that she looked like Whitney Houston, and no, not even close. She looks more like Pam Grier, and the same sensual look. And yeah, that would have been. I've heard of Get Christy Love being mentioned in other websites, but yeah, it tanked. I don't even know the year when it showed. It must have been, of course, I suspect around maybe 1975, perhaps. But anyway, next one. These two following were, well, this one was they're not variety shows, but they were shows named after the actual actors and actresses. This one was called Karen, and it was, of course, Karen Valentine starring. And it was a mid-season comedy replacement, that series that began in January and lasted until June of 1975 of the same year. She plays Karen Angelo, who is a single woman working in a project called Open America, which is an organization in Washington, D.C., who were seeking out and exposing crooked politicians and doing a lot of lobbying work for a lot of citizens' concerns. And Denver Pyle, who went on to become Uncle Jesse in Dukes of Hazzard, and he played in The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams, which came out in 1978, starred in this plot as well, but his character would be taken over by Charles Lane in the remaining episodes. And as I warned you before, I've been overexerting myself the last few days, and I haven't been getting a good sleep, so that's why I put a warning that I might seem out of sorts in this video, but it's still going to be a fun one because it's just describing and going over a lot of these unknown TV shows, which, of course, I don't think really anybody have heard of, and if they did, they don't remember. This one I remember, though. It was called Grady, and it was based on Sanford and Son's character, played by Whitman Mayo, who played Grady Wilson on the Sanford and Son, who was Sanford's longtime neighbor and friend. And it stars him, and he moves into Watts neighborhood in L.A. in order to spend more time with his daughter and her family. But when Sanford and Son's the star of Sanford and Son, Red Fox, who he walked out on Sanford and Son instead of shutting down completely. The producers gave Grady the opportunity to step into the limelight while Fox was gone. Much to Fox's dismay, Grady did very well in filling in. So I think Red Fox was kicking himself in the ass, so to speak. And like I said, I'm so tired. After this, I'm definitely going to go ahead and lay down with my poor dog. You know, she's getting old, but the pills are working for her, and we gave her baby aspirin, so she's doing well. You know, doing well considering the source. And another one was very short-lived. From March to May of 1977, was called Dog and Cat. And it starred Kim Basinger, and she played Officer J.Z. Kane, who was a rookie cop partnered with can't read. Hold on. With police veteran Detective Sergeant Jack Ramsey, who was played by an actor named Lou Antonio. This was a light-hearted look at police work, and both the car that they both tooled around in was a 66 VW Bug equipped with a Porsche 9-12 engine. And Dog and Cat was slang for male-female partnership, and the slogan on one of the ads was, "She's cool, he's square. Together, they put crooks in the cooler." So, yeah, this was very short-lived, something I never even heard of. And in that year also produced a short-lived TV series that I covered in 1977 called Blansky's Beauties. And I thought it was a spinoff of Charlie's Angels, which wasn't. It was just about showgirls, and Nancy Walker was like their head, like the leader of that, and they were under her wing, so to speak, and they were Vegas showgirls. That's about all I can say. And the next one was lasted only a month in 1974. It was called The Texas Wheelers. And this starred Mark Hamill, and you know him from Star Wars fame, from the very beginning Star Wars, which I think that Star Wars genre, they should have quit while they were ahead. I think until Return of the Jedi, I think they should have just ended it right there. But that's just my opinion. This starred Mark Hamill and Jack Elam, who starred in a lot of Western films. And Lee, I know, I think you've I don't know if you mentioned to me, but I'm sure you've seen a lot of Western films, and I know you're familiar with Jack Elam. And he was in High Noon, movies like High Noon and Support Your Local Sheriff. And Elam plays Zach Wheeler, who was a layabout father who is saddled with taking care of his 4 kids after their mother dies. Again, another cog in the wheel of the pattern that seemed to be prevalent in the 70s, where someone's taking care of their kids after their mother dies, someone bringing in a sister or cousin, siblings in after their parents die. It's always about a widow and single parents, I think, were becoming the norm back then too, or they were starting to come into the norm. But I was telling Lee in the beginning in the video about how this seemed to be a pattern. But this one, like I said, lasted a full whopping 4 episodes, even though 11 were filmed. And in July of 1975, the remaining episodes were aired. Not that anyone cared. And young Mark Hamill, of course, and Gary Busey star in this. And of course, Mark Hamill went on to the Star Wars franchise. And like I said, I think he gave up after, I think he was in the 3rd one. I'm not sure. And I think it was The Empire Strikes Back, where you hear the Luke, I am your father. So yeah, but like I said, the first few, they should have stopped there. And another kooky short-lived, who only lasted a month, and this was from September to October 1978, and it was called In the Beginning. And it was an update of sorts of a 1944 film called Going My Way, who starred Bing Crosby. Starred McLean Stevenson, who played Father Cleary, who was a conservative priest who was at odds with Sister Agnes, played by Priscilla Lopez, who was more liberal towards sinners. And this made for a good mix for comedic interactions and a multitude of characters that came into the mission for Baltimore. 9 episodes were filmed, but 5 were broadcast. And Stevenson's second attempt, this is his second attempt at a series since MASH, with the first beginning with the McLean Stevenson Show. And then after this, he went to star in another short-lived film that began in 1979 called Hello, Larry. I think he was a single father raising the girls. I'm not sure if the mom died. I didn't pay too much attention. I did watch some of those episodes, but I can't remember if he was just a single parent. Maybe they got sick of the widower pattern. You know, they maybe decided to start the single mom dad pattern there. And another one I've heard of this too, and of course this didn't last long. It went from September to December of 1978, and it was called Who's Watching the Kids? And one of the stars was Scott Baio, who fancied himself a ladies' man and who would try to spend time in this Las Vegas bar where this is centered around. And it was a story of 2 friends named Stacy Turner and Angie Vitola. And they both rented an apartment in Vegas, and they were living their dream by working at a bar called the Sand Pie in Las Vegas. And Scott Baio would try to hit on all the ladies there. More than likely, I'm sure, with no success. And both girls were guardians to 2 younger siblings, and they're kind of in control of the other. And both kids were forever coming up with ideas to get everyone around them, the sisters and everyone around them and the sisters in trouble. And Larry Breeding, an actor named Larry Parnell, played Larry Breeding, the next door neighbor who would often babysit. And Breeding was an up-and-coming star, but he went on to star in another short-lived TV show called The Last Resort, which lasted for only 15 episodes. But he made several guest appearances and several shows over the decade, but sadly he was killed in a car accident on September 28, 1982 at the age of 36. And it's kind of sad. I mean, it's sad that both he went on. I was saying that he should have stayed with that show before going on to another short-lived, but both were short-lived. So either way, it was a lose-lose situation. And the poor guy met his demise in a car accident. But now we're getting to the list of the absolute ridiculous to ridiculous, laughable, and to the most pathetic. And this one only lasted a month, and I remember hearing about this one. This one lasted from September to October 1979, and it aired on CBS. It was called Struck by Lightning. And again, Jack Elam starred in it, and Jeffrey Kramer. And the 11 episodes were filmed, and only 3 were aired before being pulled from schedule. But they ran entire series in the UK in 1980. So I'm going to ask Lady Peeps if she remembers this, Lee. And anyway, Jeffrey Kramer plays a science teacher by the name of Ted Stein, and he discovers that he inherited the Victorian Brightwater Inn, but he decides to sell it until he discovers the handyman Frank is really Frankenstein's monster. Of course, that's played by Jack Elam. Scary to look at, but very kind, sweet, and a little clumsy, and very dumb concoctions. And I think no wonder it only lasted for 3 episodes. I mean, come on, you inherit an inn, and your innkeeper or groundskeeper is Frankenstein's monster. Okay. Like I said, I don't know who the masterminds behind these, and either what bad drugs they took, or what how were their childhoods. So anyway, that being said, even more ridiculous was one that lasted for 3 months from February to May of 1979. And it was called Super Train, and it was a nuclear-powered high-speed bullet train that would go from New York to LA in 36 hours. And it was quoted as sort of a love boat on rails. And this had all the comforts of home, such as a pool, restaurants, and shopping centers. Wow. Talk about a super train. That actually would kind of be a little interesting, don't you think? But anyway, this is a 60-minute comedy drama that aired on NBC for just 9 episodes, and it was the biggest and most expensive flops of all time. I think the more expensive than that one that I discussed called Chopper One, where they spent $140,000 because they needed 2 choppers and paid those stuntmen stunt pay, and of course they had to pay the city of LA a lot of fines. And this one actually starred a lot of big name stars such as Joyce DeWitt, who was in Three's Company, Isabel Sanford, who was in The Jeffersons, Jamie Farr from MASH, James Gregory from Love Boat, and oh no, James Gregory, not sure who James Gregory was, but it also starred Vic Tayback, who went on to star in Alice, and who had starred in Alice, and Bernie Capal from The Love Boat. So talk about being a Love Boat on rails. There was one of the stars was from the Love Boat. How ironic. And the next one, and this was even more, it's getting more and more ridiculous down the line, and I'm getting near the end here. This one was called Holmes and Yo-Yo, and this was from September to December of 1976. And it stars Richard B. Shull as Detective Alexander Holmes, who was a highly accident-prone sheriff who always seemed to land every one of his partners in the hospital. But the police department had an idea for a robotic police officer in the guise of Detective Gregory, nicknamed Yo-Yo, Gregory Yanovich, who was played by John Schuck. And there was a running gag there, too, where the police department would have Officer Maxine Moon, played by an actress named Andrea Howard. They would have her make passes at Yo-Yo with no success because evidently he couldn't feel normal emotions like a human. And it was scheduled again. Actually, it was on one of the lists, a lot of the critics' lists, as one of the most worst series ever produced. And actually, the producers and network execs were hoping to pull more viewers, preferably children, away from the competition due to the slapstick silliness of the show. But the public, however, they were not amused, evidently, and were very fickle, and then it went nowhere. Kind of a funny idea, but I guess it just didn't, I don't know. It's actually, I would have to maybe look up on YouTube, but it's actually kind of an interesting concept, to be honest with you. And now we're coming close to the 3 most pathetic. One of them is called Flatbush, and it stars Adrian Zemed, who I never really liked. I don't know why, because ever since I saw that terrible, terrible sequel to Grease 2, awful, just awful. He played the lead character, Johnny Nogarilli, and Michelle played his would-be girlfriend, and Michelle Pfeiffer was absolutely gorgeous back then. I remember being so jealous of her. Anyway, it starred him and an actor named Joseph Cali, who played the character Joey of Saturday Night Fever. He was one of the hoodlums. This show aired from February to March 79, 1 month, and this should tell you how horrible it is. And it was about 5 high school graduates living in middle-class neighborhood of Flatbush in New York, and they formed the Flatbush Fungos, which was a gang that roamed the neighborhood looking for fun and excitement. Hey. And Joseph Cali was a cab driver, and Adrian Zemed was a fashion plate working in a clothing store. Actor named Sandy Helberg played Figgy, who was a grocery store delivery person. Randy Stumpf played Joey, who was an apprentice plumber during the day and went to night school to be pursuing a law degree, who was actually obviously the more smart and ambitious one of the 5. So that's 5 there. So there's who was Flatbush? Who does Joseph Cali plays a cab driver, and I don't know their names. I didn't get their names, but the cab driver of the fashion plate, Figgy, the grocery store person, Randy played Joey, the apprentice plumber. Oh, and then an actor named Vince Buffaro, who played a character named Turtle, who worked at the family's restaurant. And of course, it was not very well received due to the real life president of Flatbush, who demanded it be pulled off the air due to its insulting use of stereotypes. So it's not known if the producers followed his advice or they just did it on their own, because the show was canceled after only 3 episodes. And to the even more, we're getting close. This is the second most ridiculous one, and it was called Highcliffe Manor, which aired from April to May of 1979, and it stars Shelley Fabares as Helen Black, who was a recently widowed, again, recent widow who inherits a huge stone mansion off the coast of Massachusetts. And it was the home of a kind of a think tank group, and populated with a wide assortment of strange characters. They plot to get rid of Helen in order to develop their plans of cloning all world leaders. And it also starred Audrey Landers, to name it, of all people, Audrey Landers, Jenny O'Hara, not sure who she is, Ernie Hudson, not sure who he is, and Stephen McHattie. I'm sure they were big names in the day, but I only remember Audrey Landers. And many critics complained about the laugh track, and ABC ordered 6 episodes, but only 3 were aired. It's got to be bad if people complain about the laugh track. So that I got to check out on YouTube if I can find any. And the winner of the most pathetic was called A Year at the Top. And it starred, who Paul Schaefer is, and Greg Evigan, the jerk off of BJ and the Bear. Oh God, his face, now I think it was so fucking punchable. And he had this machismo, this attitude. I think even in his acting, I think I'm led to think that personally he's like that in real life too. I don't know why, but yeah, I watched BJ and the Bear for a while and had the biggest crush on him, and then luckily that was squashed really quick by the Dukes of Hazzard. But anyway, this only lasted a month, from August to September of 1977, and it's about 2 struggling musicians who make a deal with Satan's son for success. And Mickey Rooney starred in the pilot episode, and this show, no wonder it only lasted for a month. And, of course, Schaefer, of course, now, is a big name. He was a sidekick to Letterman. He was a band leader. And Evigan's hardly heard of, thank God. But that was why I called that the most pathetic, not only because it was stupid, the plot was stupid, but because it stars Greg Evigan in it. But so, yeah, a lot of these, there was more, but I figured I'd cover the most that caught my attention and my interest. And some of them were kind of boring, like the Texas Wheelers, but I figured I'd throw that in anyway. But yeah, so there were some that were interesting, like the beginning. The best one, I think, was the Project UFO and the Sixth Sense. And Mobile One, I think those were the 3 most interesting. And then there were the silly, and then this was the downright pathetic, those last 3. So anyway, it was good exposing to everybody through a lot of these TV shows that are buried way deep in the archives, probably in the depths of Hades somewhere, but they were regurgitated by a lot of these people who hunted this stuff down, or who maybe had a brief memory of them. And like I said, some of these I remember hearing about the title, like Struck by Lightning. I've heard of Who's Watching the Kids. And I think that's about it. But anyway, I'm glad you guys can join, and I hope you enjoyed. And please share this video with your friends and have them subscribe, and please hit the notification button for more upcoming videos. And today is going to be a relaxing day, and I apologize for my mannerisms today and my state of mind. I'm going to get lots of rest today. So everybody have a wonderful Wednesday, and I will see you again with more fun and entertainment of the 70s era. And everyone stay cool out there. It's in the 90s. So everyone thanks, Lee. Everyone stay cool and stay healthy, and I will see you again soon. Bye.